Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's lecture. Um, this week we're going to look at career development and transitions of working adults. When we look at career development concerns for adults, we have to look at it from a holistic perspective, looking at the biological, psychological, social, cultural, and life cycle forces that influence human development. Um, this is true when we think about it in terms of practicality. When a person is much younger, they may have more energy, more physical strength, more mental acuity, and may have fewer responsibilities compared to when they're in the midlife or when you're much older. And also, the roles that a person occupy in the society also differ based on the level of development that they are in terms of their age and all of that. When a person is much younger, they may have less responsibilities compared to when they are in their mid career or when they are getting close to retirement. And so when we look at it in terms of all of these several factors in terms of the biological, psychological, social, cultural, and life cycle forces, then we would have a more holistic idea of how of the concerns that a person would have. And so we're going to look at some of the specific and important factors that are highlighted in each stage of the development. When a person is much younger and they're trying to and they get a job or trying to get into the workforce, in that stage they are trying to get established. They're trying to learn much about the jobs and to be able to get themselves situated in the work environment. But by the time they get to the mid-career level, which is more of the supervisory and the managerial level, that's a place where they're more stable and they're trying to maintain their growth. In late career to retirement, it is a time that they're transitioning out of the workplace and going to work on things that they find more fulfilling. So you would find that when people get to their retirement or get close to their retirement, they're thinking of activities that are much more strenuous and that will provide them not necessarily with income, but some type of satisfaction that in doing them. So much flexibility, and it would almost seem like leisure and not work. And so a person occupies several roles as they make transitions from the early career to the mid career and down to the late career. So the roles could be that of a worker, a homemaker, someone that is focused on leisure, someone that wants to just be a good citizen, and all of that. Another thing that you would find is that because of globalization, job security has changed. In the past, people used to work in a place for a long time and would stay on those jobs for a relatively long period of time. But in contemporary times, the the work environment has become a little more dynamic, such that people don't usually get to work in a particular place for as long as they want to. Um, and so we need to put that into perspective when we work with our clients and as they make those transitions. For adults also, there is also that realization that pay increases are no longer completely tied to longevity but more to experiences and expertise and the skill sets that they bring. Many places endorse pay for performance, and we know that as a factor of aging, the older a person gets, the more likely that their performance after a while will tend to decline, and even their capacity to learn and to adapt could become problematic. And so for adults, as they move through the stage, um, it is important that clients to emphasize that learning to adapt and become flexible is important. There are adults currently that are not very conversant with the technology that's used in the workplace. These are people that grew up in an era in which much of the information technology and the gadgets that are used in modern workplaces were not available. And so they would have to learn to adapt and to become more flexible in how work is done for them to become more successful. And most organizations, regardless of their settings in contemporary time, are driven by the global economy. And so the job market tends to change from time to time. And so you would find that job security is not a certainty, but it is dependent on the ability of the organization to adapt. And so the workers themselves also have to adapt to the environment. If we look at the adult career development from a biopsychosocial framework, we could look at it in terms of all of the genetic and health-related factors that affect development. A normal, healthy person may be able to go through all of the stages that are expected. Maybe when they were much younger, they would work hard and get to the middle career stage and then eventually to the late career and the retirement. But that is also contingent on how good their health is. Do they have genetic predisposition to work? And what health challenges would they have that would impact them? And as work becomes increasingly knowledge-based, do they have the capacity to address all of that? Another thing is the psychological forces, which include all the internal, perceptual, cognitive, emotional, and personality factors that affect a person's development. If a person is not psychologically stable or does not have the right personality for a job, will they have as much career success, or will they be able to get into certain occupations let's say someone that has a mental health challenge that's episodic or seasonal. How does that fit into the career counseling model for adults? Another factor is the social cultural forces, and this include interpersonal, social, cultural, and ethnic factors. In the U.S., these factors play an important role in not only the occupations that people choose, but how long they work. There's covert racism, and there are economic and social and socio-political policies that sometimes create barriers for people from minority groups. For instance, when we look at it from the perspective of occupational structure, that is in terms of the jobs that are available to people within the environment, it is possible that minorities tend to have fewer opportunities within the environment. The last thing that I want to talk about here in terms of the biopsychosocial framework is the life cycle forces that reflect differences in how the same events affect people of different ages. How do people perceive the challenges that they face, or how does the forces that are prevalent in the environment affect people that are of similar ages, given the differences maybe in their gender, race, or ethnicities. And so, just like I talked about, the early career stage is that stage between the ages of 25 to 44, and it is a critical stage where the person is forming a unique identity in the world of work. It's like what the common saying say, trying to cut their teeth. And so at this point, the person is balancing both intimacy and isolation in terms of how they want to interact with people, what mentors they're choosing, what opportunities they are gravitating to it now that would help them to maintain a unique identity, and now that would help them to achieve the success that they want. But oftentimes, this is the time that they're exposed to most of the stress and the competition that's prevalent in most workplaces. Most current environments emphasize teamwork, and this is important because some people may not necessarily have that exposure or experience of working with others in a group to achieve the goals they want. In early career, individuals really need to demonstrate the ability to function well on the job and to be able to get along with others. One of the things that people form in their early careers is what we call career anchors. These are considered to be their core values, interests, and abilities that help them to make professional choices. So career anchors is essentially a combination of perceived areas of competence, motives, values that relate to their professional work. Also include talents, the motives, the values, the attitudes which give that person a stability and direction in their career. So essentially, it's like the motivator or the driver of that person. What is that thing that drives that person to continue in that career path that they're in? To help people to avoid problems with recognizing the preferences for certain areas of their job, career anchors help people to uncover the real values and to use those to make better career choices. So they are not just pursuing interests that do not align with their values. In the mid-career and maintenance stage, the individual is setting their own task and socio-emotional needs. And so they're well adjusted, so to speak. The greatest challenge within that mid-career phase is for a person to balance the conflicting demands that come with the work environment and their personal life. And so it's important for the counselor to work with the person to develop a perspective of positive growth orientation in the work environment and to encourage that individual to adapt to change in that work environment. Most work environments are very dynamic and are very prone to change. In late career, the individual is pretty much looking forward to transitioning to retirement. And so career issues for these people include age-related changes in their abilities and job performance. They're not able to perform on the job as they were when they were much younger in their middle career. So maybe the speed with which they can do the job, their comprehension, the ability to move around or maybe to travel as much as possible is not possible. There. Another thing is that many people that are much older tend to experience discrimination on in their employment settings, and so this could create problems for such individuals. Others are maybe they're declining health and family factors. And so all of this influences kind of like interact to impact the career development of adults. And so